Be coloured in, let's add some texture to it. For that, we need to leave coat mode and go into style mode. To leave a mode, select the exit button in the top right of the screen. Or you can use a shortcut. Hold L1 and press circle. Just like scoping out of a group. Now use the Modes menu to switch over to Style mode. The Style mode icon is an S-shaped brushstroke. All sculptures and paintings in Dreams are made up of flecks, and Style mode is where we manipulate them. For example, notice how the objects in this scene look smooth. That's because their flecks are small and tightly packed together. We can make them more textured with the Looseness tool. Select the Looseness tool. It looks like a blurry circle. Now try using R2 to loosen some of the foliage in the scene. Don't hold back. As you can see, loosening sculptures and paintings means their flecks become more obvious. If you think they're getting too loose, press triangle to make the tool subtractive and tighten them up again with R2. Or you can just use the left directional button to undo. Don't forget to loosen up the river too. We'll need it in the following steps. Carry on loosening the objects in the scene. When you're happy, proceed to the next step. Wonderful! Connie's garden looks like a lovely painting. Let's look at the water now. Water has a reflective quality, so let's add some shine to the river. This is where the Finish tool comes in. Exit out of Style mode with L1 and circle and head back into Coat mode in the Modes menu. Next to the Colors menu in Coat mode, you'll find the Finishes menu. Select it with X. These finishes change the way objects react to light in your scene. Using finishes, you can make objects shiny, rough, metallic, or even translucent. Now you can choose your finish for the river. Exit out of Style mode with L1 and circle and head back into Coat mode in the Modes menu. Next to the Colors menu in Coat mode, you'll find the Finishes menu. Select it with X. These finishes change the way objects react to light in your scene. Using finishes, you can make objects shiny, rough, metallic, or even translucent. Now you can choose your finish for the river. Let's see. Ah, yes. How about shiny wax? Wax finishes are translucent, and the shine will give the river a reflective surface that will catch the light. Apply the finish as before using R2. Remember that you can revert your changes by switching to subtractive mode with triangle or by using undo. Try editing the finish on other groups and objects in the scene. Continue to the next step when you're ready. Our river looks nice and shiny now, but something's missing. It doesn't flow like water does. But there's a magical tool for that in effects mode. It's called the flow tool. Leave coat mode if you haven't already, and enter effects mode. The effects mode icon has some twinkly stars on it. Alongside the flow tool, you'll notice other animated effects that you can apply to sculptures or paintings. But for now, we'll pick the flow tool. Its icon is a tap, or a faucet if you're from the US. Press X over the flow tool to select it, and use R2 to apply it to the river. Isn't that lovely? In effects mode, you can preview the flow effect even when time is paused. But if you leave effects mode, you'll need to click R3 to see the effects in action. When the river's flowing at the right speed, you may notice something a bit odd. It's flowing the wrong way. Let's fix that using another tool found in Style mode, the Comb tool. Leave effects mode using L1 and circle, then go back into Style mode via the Modes menu. The Comb tool icon is some wavy lines. Select it with X. Now we're going to make the river flow the correct way. How do we do that? You guessed it. Hold R2 to comb the flecks of the river so they go in the right direction. We're no longer in effects mode, so we can't see the flow effect animating. But just click R3 to start time, and you'll be able to see it again. The key is to move your imp in the direction you'd like the flecks to flow. A bit like you're combing the river's hair. Very stylish. Let go of R2 when you're happy with the flow direction. And now you can see the river is going the correct way. But if it isn't, just undo and try again. When you're happy with the speed and direction of the river, click L3 to rewind time. Then it's off to the next step. This scene is really coming together. Next, let's do something interesting with the chimney smoke. Move closer to the smoke so you can see the flecks clearly. These flecks don't look very smoky, do they? Let's change that. If you're not already in Style Mode, head there now using the Modes menu. Open the Flex menu with X. It's the button in the center of the top row. Now choose a fleck that looks smoky. How about the dots fleck? Now that the scene is looking good, we should make Connie's cottage look more welcoming for her. Now that the scene is looking good, this scene is really coming smoke. Move closer to the smoke so you can see the flecks clearly. These flecks don't look very smoky, do they? Let's change that. If you're not already in Style Mode, head there now using the Modes menu. Open the Flex menu with X. It's the button in the center of the top row. Now choose a fleck that looks smoky. How about the dots fleck? When you choose a fleck type, it'll automatically select the Apply Fleck tool. Now, hover your imp over the smoke and hold R2. The flecks will change. That's better. Let's inspect it now using the grab cam. Grab it with R1. And while you're grabbing, spin around it with the left or right stick. The paint strokes look a bit flat, don't they? You can only see them well from certain angles. We can make it a bit more billowy and three-dimensional using the Impasto tool. In the Style menu, select the Impasto tool, then hold R2 to apply it to the Our river looks nice and shiny now. Magical mode. The effects mode icon has some twinkly stars on it. Magical tool for that. Wonderful. Connie's garden looks like a lovely painting. Let's look at the water now. Water has a reflective quality, so let's add some shine to the river. This is where the Finish tool comes in. Exit out. Our river looks nice and shiny now, but something's missing. It doesn't flow like water. This scene is really coming together. Next, let's do something interesting with the chimney smoke. With X, it's the button in the center of the select the Apply Fleck tool. Now, hover your imp over the smoke and hold R2. The flecks will change. Grab it with R1. Make it a bit more billowy and three-dimensional using the Impasto tool. In the Style menu, select the Impasto tool, then hold R2 to apply it to the smoke. Watch as the individual flecks of the painting become more three-dimensional. To see it better, use the grab cam to spin around the smoke again. You can also press undo and redo to compare the smoke with and without Impasto. Now that you've mastered Impasto, The last style tool we're going to use is the ruffle tool. The ruffle tool icon looks like a lot of lines going in different directions. It will randomly rotate the flecks so they're not as orderly. It works in the same way as the other two tools. Select it with X, then use R2 to apply it. And switch the tool to subtractive by pressing triangle. Ruffle makes quite a difference, doesn't it? Why not see if you can animate the smoke using the flow tool in effects mode? Now that the scene is looking good, we should make Connie's cottage look more welcoming for her. Now that the scene is looking good, this scene is really coming together. How select, grab, make it a bit more, then hold R2 to apply individual flecks of around the smoke impasto directions. It will randomly rotate the flecks so they're not as orderly. And switch the... When you're happy, go to the next step of the tutorial. Now that the scene is looking good, we should make Connie's cottage look more welcoming for her. We can do that using something called the glow tool. So head back to the modes menu and into coat mode. The glow tool has an icon that looks like a little sun. Select it with X, then move your view over to the cottage for a closer look. Now position your view so that you can see the door and the window of the cottage. Then hold R2 over the window in the door to make it glow. Go on, give it some welly. Whoa, that's too bright. Let's press triangle to make the tool subtractive, then use R2 to reduce the glow. Maybe you could try tinting the window to change the color of the light. See what you think. Have a play with the glow tool, and then move on to the next step when you're ready. The scene looks so alive now, and Connie's in love with her new home. It's hard to believe that this scene used to be all grey and blocky. Let's try something. How different did we actually make it? To see, we can use a special trick. Press square to open the menu, and then take a look in the Show Hide section. The Show Hide icon looks like an open eye. It can be found in most of the mode's menus. In the Show Hide menu, you can make all sorts of different objects visible or invisible. It only works in edit mode, so your scene will still look the same in play mode. Some of them are on by default, and some are switched off. Coat, Style and Effects is one of the options which is on by default. Its icon is a combination of the icons for all three of those modes. Try turning it off by pressing X over it. Wow! What an amazing difference. That shows you how powerful these tools really are. Using Coat, Style and Effects, you can make even the most boring block come alive. Practice using the tools and see what you can come up with. When you're finished, go to Play Mode in the Options menu and walk Connie into her beautiful new home. This will complete the tutorial. Practice using the tools and see what you can come up with. When you're finished, go to Play Mode in the Options menu and walk Connie into her beautiful new home. I hope you've got your imp under control. I've got some spectacular tricks to show you, and some that are just all right. In this tutorial, you'll master the basic controls you learned in the home space. But this time, you'll have the full freedom of edit mode. Use the video player to play through the tutorial steps. Follow the steps carefully. It's not just about getting to the end, it's the journey that counts. So here we are. This is where the magic happens. Edit mode. The row of buttons you can see is the assembly menu. That's where you'll find all the tools and modes you need to construct your scenes. It can be opened and closed by pressing the square button. In this tutorial, you're going to learn all about the exciting world of logic. Pay no attention to Cuthbert. It's not as complicated as it sounds, I promise. Let's check out the scene. See the buttons on the platforms in front of our good friend Connie? They activate the bridges that will take her to the next platform. At least that's what they're supposed to do. To get them working, you'll need to connect them to the gadgets that control them. You can't see gadgets when you're in play mode, but they let you do all sorts of useful things in edit mode. You can tell gadgets apart by their color and icons. Green gadgets are sensors and inputs. This one is what we call a trigger zone. It's one of the more versatile gadgets. It can trigger other gadgets when it detects something in the scene. Like in this case, Connie standing on the button. Hi, Connie! If you select the gadget with X, you'll be able to see its detection zone. That's it, right there above the button. Press the circle button to deselect the trigger zone, and let's look at the next gadget. Pink gadgets are movers and outputs, meaning they make things happen in the scene. This particular gadget is a rotator, and it's connected to the first bridge. Click R3 to start time, and let's see what it does. Well, not a lot right now by the looks of it. That's because the rotator is switched off. You can tell because the gadget is dim at the moment. But if we connect these two gadgets together, we can turn the rotator on using the trigger zone. In the next step, I'll show you how. Before we start connecting things, make sure you can see both gadgets. You'll notice they have ports sticking out of their sides. Ports on the left are inputs, and the ones on the right are outputs. Hover over the output port on the trigger zone now. You'll see the word detected appear. That means that when the trigger zone detects something, this output will send a signal. Before it can send that signal to the rotator, though, we'll need to connect them with a wire. So hover over the detected output and press R2 or X. You'll notice your imp is now tethered to the port by a wire. Power ports have appeared on the gadgets too. It's these ports that switch gadgets on or off. Okay, drag the wire over to the rotator gadget. Now hover over the power port at the bottom, then press R2 or X. Once the gadgets are connected, the wire will disappear automatically. That way, your scene won't get cluttered. After all, you don't want wires all over the place. You can see the wire again by hovering over either gadget. Okay, time to test our connection out. So let's switch over to play mode in the options menu. That's more like it. Now the trigger zone detects Connie when she stands on the button and activates the rotator on the bridge. As soon as she steps off, the rotator stops working. You can use the button to get the bridge lined up with the platform. Once Connie can make it to the second platform, you can head back to edit mode and move on to the next step. Now that we've connected the rotator, let's take a look at the second platform.
See the yellow gadget on its side?
This gadget isn't a sensor or an output. It's called a microchip. Microchips are used to organize logic in scenes. You can think of them as boxes of gadgets and wires. Let's have a look inside. Hover over this one with your imp, hold L1 and press X. It's just like scoping into a group of objects. This window is the microchip's canvas. And if these gadgets look familiar, it's because they're two rotators. Each one controls half of this jointed drawbridge. Try to connect the output from the trigger zone to the power ports on the rotators. You can create multiple wires from the same output. Or you can clone wires in the scene by holding L1, then grabbing them with R2. Clone the wire near the rotator to create a new wire from the trigger zone. Once you've connected the trigger zone to the second rotator, switch over to play mode and make sure it's all working. OK, jumping on the button now will activate the trigger zone and raise the drawbridge so that you can cross over the... Oh, wait a minute. The bridge has dropped down before Connie could cross. That's because the signal to the rotator stopped sending as soon as Connie stepped off the trigger zone. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. In the next step, I'll show you how to make signals stay on. If we want the bridge to stay up, we'll need to add a gadget between the trigger zone and the rotator to keep it activated. We can do this with a counter. So let's go into the assembly menu. Press square to open it if it's closed. Select the gadgets menu with X. You'll find the counter in the logic and processing section. The gadgets in this menu take an input signal and change it in some way before sending it on. Go ahead and select the counter. Its icon is a tally counter. Now you can see the gadget on your imp. Hover over the microchip and it will snap to the canvas. Press R2 or X to stamp the counter onto the microchip, then press circle to unequip it. The counter gadget counts up or down whenever it receives a signal through its inputs. By default, it starts its count at 0 and has a target of 1. Once it reaches that target, it sends a constant signal through its counterfull output port. Before we connect it though, let's tidy up the wires connecting the trigger zone to the rotators. Just hover over them and press triangle to delete them. Now press R2 or X over the detected output of the trigger zone to create a new wire. Connect it to the increase count input port on the counter. That's the port with the plus sign icon. Now when the trigger zone is activated, the counter will go up to 1. And, this is the important part, it will stay at 1 even after the trigger zone deactivates. Now hover over the counterfull output port of the counter. This port sends a signal when the counter reaches its target. Create a wire with R2 or X and connect it to one of the rotator's power ports. Then do the same for the other one. Time to switch to play mode and try out our new connections. When you're happy everything's working as it should, return to edit mode and move on to the next step. Just one more bridge for Connie to cross. As you can see, we have another microchip on the platform, so let's open it up. Hover over it with your imp, hold L1 and press X. Okay, looks like we have everything we need here. But Connie's an adventurer, so how about we make this last bridge more challenging? Adding a timer to the logic should get the adrenaline going. Once Connie activates the button, she'll only have a few seconds to cross before the bridge drops back down. Let's head back to the assembly menu. If it isn't already open, press square. Then go into the gadgets section. You'll find the timer in the same place as the counter, the logic and processing section. Its button has a clock face on it. Now go ahead and stamp the timer gadget onto the microchip with R2 or X. Then unequip it from your imp with the circle button. Now let's take a closer look at the timer's inputs and outputs. You can see their names by hovering over the ports. The first input is a start timer port. Once this receives a signal, it will start the clock. The second one is Reset Timer, which sets the time back to 0. Over on the output side, we have Timer Finished and Timer Output. Timer Finished sends a signal when the timer reaches the required number. It's set to 5 seconds by default. Timer Output is a little more sophisticated. The signal it sends represents the timer's current progress. If, let's say, it's only halfway to its target, the signal it sends will be half strength. So how do we connect this so the bridge only stays up for a few seconds? Well, we need the bridge to be raised while the timer is running. So create a wire on the timer output with R2 or X. Remember how we used the counter on the previous platform? We can use one here too. Just like before, connect the wire to the counter's increase count input. Then connect the counter full output to the rotator's power port. Time to see if it works. Click R3 to test it out. As you can see, since the timer isn't connected to a trigger yet, the clock starts ticking as soon as we play the scene. The bridge goes up, but doesn't drop down when the timer finishes. That can only mean one thing. There's a problem with the logic. But doesn't drop since the timer isn't connected to power port. Time to see if it works. Click R3 to test it out. As you can see, since the timer isn't connected to a trigger yet, the clock starts ticking as soon as we play the scene. The bridge goes up, but doesn't drop down when the timer finishes. That can only mean one thing. There's a problem with the logic. If you'd like to figure it out for yourself, feel free to check the gadgets and see what's wrong. Or move on to the next step and we'll go through it together. So let's take a look at why the bridge stayed up after the timer finished instead of going back down. Remember how we used the counter earlier to remember the signal from the trigger zone? Well, now it's remembering the signal from the timer, so we need to make it forget that once the timer finishes. Let's go over to the counter gadget. Hover over the inputs to see their names. This one here is Reset Count. It'll put the counter back to 0, which will turn off the rotator. So all we need to do is connect it to the timer, but to which output? Aha! There we go. We can use the timer finished output. Hover over it and create a wire with R2 or X. Then stretch the wire over to the counter and connect it to the reset count input. But we also need to reset the timer, otherwise the logic will only work once. So let's get another wire from the timer finished output and connect this one to the reset timer input. You'll recognize it by the rewind symbol on it. All we have left to do is to connect the trigger zone to the start timer port so Connie can activate it. Okay, that was a lot of connections. So before we test it out, let's go over the logic we've made. First, Connie activates the trigger zone, which sends a signal to start the timer. Once the clock starts running, the timer output becomes active. This tells the counter to count up. That then turns on the rotator and raises the bridge. Now this is where the really clever stuff kicks in. After 5 seconds, the timer finishes its count, which activates the timer finished output. This in turn resets the counter to 0, cutting the signal to the rotators and lowering the bridge. And let's not forget, it also resets the timer, so the logic could be triggered again if Connie didn't cross the bridge the first time. Isn't logic exhilarating? Take your time digesting all that. Logic is easier to read if you route your wires neatly. Grab wires with X to change their paths. You can also move the gadgets around by grabbing them with R2. Feel free to test it out in play mode, but don't leave the scene just yet. I have one. One more thing to show you. So, on the third platform, we've set up a timer that makes the bridge drop after 5 seconds. But I think that might be too easy for a seasoned pro like Connie. Let's make it a little bit more challenging. First, if you're in play mode, switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. Let's move in closer to the microchip with the timer. You can use the grab cam, R1, to move your view. Now I'll show you how to tweak a gadget's settings. Hover over the timer gadget, hold L1 and press square. This tweak menu contains the settings for the timer. Hover over the sliders and buttons to see their names. The top slider sets the target time for the timer. If we lower this setting, the bridge will stay up for a shorter time. To adjust the value, hover your imp over the slider, then hold X. Use your imp to drag the slider left or right. Set it to around 3 seconds. It doesn't have to be exact. If you're a stickler for precision, You can adjust the slider incrementally using the up and down directional buttons. Just hover your imp over the slider and press up or down to tweak the value. In fact, why don't we make things really interesting for Connie? Let's set it to 2.5 seconds. You can close the tweak menu now by selecting the cross in the top corner with X. Or you could use a shortcut. Just hold L1, then press circle while hovering over the menu to close it quickly. The same shortcut works for closing microchips. Give it a try now. Hold L1, then hover your imp over the microchip and press circle. Time to test out the scene in play mode. If you have any problems crossing that last bridge, you can always tweak the timer again in edit mode. Remember, you just hover over the gadget, hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. When you're all set, take Connie to the last platform and walk through the door to complete this tutorial.
It's a beautiful day in the Dreamiverse, so Cuthbert's heading out for a stroll. It's a hard life being a cube. But Connie can't resist a practical joke, so she's dreamt up a spooky surprise for Cuthbert. She's gonna need your help to pull off this hair-raising prank. With a little lighting and atmosphere, we can transform this scene. But let's do a bit of redecorating first. Go to the assembly menu and select the search button with X. I've prepared a little collection of eerie elements for you to use. Open up the collection with X. Start by stamping a moon in the sky. Then stamp as many gravestones, crows and flaming skulls as you want. Just make sure you don't block the path. And don't stamp any spooky doors. We won't need one until later on. These spindly trees are made from paint strokes, which means they don't cast shadows. Delete them with the triangle button and replace them with the spooky tree in the collection. Once you're happy with the spook levels, move on to the next step, where I'll show you how to change the lighting in the scene. To make the sky look like it's nighttime, we can use a Sun and Sky gadget. Go to the Assembly menu and select Gadgets. Take a look in the Cameras and Lighting section. Here's where you'll find the Sun and Sky gadget. Its icon is a sun and a cloud. Select it with X and then stamp one above the garden using R2 or X. We only need one, so unequip the gadget with Circle once you've stamped it. Sun and Sky looks quite different to most gadgets. It's round instead of square, and it also has these two gizmos attached to it. Unlike most gadgets, the Sun and Sky gizmos are always visible. The ball on top of the gadget represents the sky image that's projected around the scene. Grab it with R2 to move the sky image, or hold L2 to rotate it using the motion sensor function or the sticks. Look at how the sky changes. The smaller gizmo controls the sun brightness, position and size. Grab the sun gizmo with R2. The sun gets brighter the closer it is to the sky gizmo. You can also move the sun around the gadget to change its position in the sky. This also changes the direction of the sunlight. The sun is the main light source in the scene. You can resize the sun using the up and down directional buttons while hovering over the gizmo. Resizing the sun doesn't affect its brightness, it just makes it appear larger or smaller in the sky. Try out the gizmos and get a feel for how they change the sky. You can always undo any changes with the left directional button. Start the next step when you're ready to continue. Using gizmos lets us quickly experiment with different sun and sky settings. But for some deeper control, we can use the gadget's tweak menu. Hover over the gadget, hold L1, then press square to open its tweak menu. The Sun and Sky tweak menu has 2 pages, one for the sun and one for the sky. The first page is Sun Properties. It has all the settings we changed with the gizmo, as well as a few options that are only available in the tweak menu. Sun Visible determines whether the sun can be seen in the sky, and Cast Shadows controls whether its light casts shadows. We're creating a night sky, so deselect Sun Visible. It's the button with the eye icon. Hiding the sun doesn't turn it off completely, though. It'll still emit light in the scene, even when it's not visible. You just won't see it in the sky. You can change the colour of the sun using the colour picker. Hover over the colour picker and you'll see a ring around the edge and a triangle in the centre. Grab the ring with X and move the dial to change the colour. Grab the triangle in a bluish purple. If you've closed the Sun and Sky tweak menu, open it up again with L1 and square. Its icon is a cloud. Select it with X. Directional buttons. The sky is made of flecks. You'll know all about flecks if you've played the painting tutorial. You can pick a style for the sky using the Sky Fleck type slider. The next 2 sliders control sky brightness and saturation. If you turn the brightness down to 0, your sky will be pitch black. But if you make it a bit brighter, you'll still be able to see some of the sky's colour and detail. To change the colour of the sky, you can use the colour picker. It works just like the one we use to change the sun colour. Grab the outer ring with X to change the colour, then grab the triangle in the middle to change the shade. But if you've set the sky brightness or saturation to 0, you won't see any changes to the sky colour. Experiment with the tweak menu settings and create a spooky night sky. Then start the next step when you're ready to continue. When creating a dark scene, it can be tricky to see what's going on. You could end up completely lost in a scene. If you do find yourself stumbling around in the dark, there's a useful guide you can use, which will temporarily turn off all the moody lighting. Go to the assembly menu, then select Guides with X. Look for studio lighting, then select it with X to turn it on. That's better, isn't it? Now we can see everything properly again. Studio lighting fills the scene with a bright, ambient light. Any lighting, grading or fog will be disabled so you can see exactly where everything is and what it looks like. Deselect the studio lighting button to turn all your atmospheric gadgets back on. Studio lighting is only active in edit mode, so the scene will still be dark and spooky when we go into play mode. When you're ready to continue, go back to edit mode and start the next step. The sun and sky gadget isn't the only way to light a scene. You might have noticed that there's a light gadget in the scene. Light gadgets can be used to create more sophisticated lighting, or to illuminate specific areas or objects. If you can't see it properly, just check that you don't have studio lighting switched on. Grab the light with R2 to move it around. Or grab it with L2 and use the motion sensor function to rotate it. You can add more lights to the scene from the assembly menu. Go to the Gadgets menu, then open Cameras and Lighting. Select the Light gadget with X and stamp one in your scene, then press Circle to drop the gadget from your IMP. Select the Light gadget with the Assembly menu. Go to the Gadgets menu, then open Cameras and Lighting. Select the Light gadget with X and stamp one in your scene, then press Circle to drop the gadget from your IMP. If you select the light with X, you'll reveal its gizmo. This cone-shaped gizmo shows the angle and range of the light. Hover your IMP over the edges of the cone and grab them with R2. Move your IMP to widen the angle or extend the range of the light. You can grab the white dot at the end of the cone to change the range, angle and direction all at the same time. You can move and rotate the whole light independently of the gadget by grabbing the positional gizmo with R2 or L2. When lighting a scene, it's important to consider how the player will see it. If you pull back from the garden, you'll see that there's a camera gadget in the scene. Switch over to play mode to see how the scene looks through that camera. Having a defined viewing angle can help inform your lighting choices. So keep in mind the camera angle when you're setting up your lights. Try editing your lights using the gizmos to illuminate an area of your scene. Of course, the gizmos aren't the only way to edit lights. Like everything else, lights can also be tweaked. We'll take a look at that in the next step. So let's take a look at the Lights Tweak menu. Hover your imp over a light in the scene, hold L1, then press square. Lights can either be spot or diffuse. Spotlights illuminate in a specific direction, whereas diffuse lights cast in all directions. Light gadgets are set to be spotlights by default. But you can easily change their type by selecting the diffuse button. For this scene, it's better if we stick to using spotlights though. Notice the spotlight has tweak sliders for beam range and beam angle. These sliders do the same thing as the gizmos we used in the last step, but they give you more precise control. The fade angle slider changes the softness of the spot. At 0%, the spot will have a sharp edge. As you increase the slider, the edge will become softer. Deselecting the Cast Shadows button will stop the light from casting shadows. A very useful feature, but not for our spooky garden, as shadows will add to the overall atmosphere. The last two sliders, Use Image and Image Blur, allow you to project an image with the light. Images can be used to break up the light and add texture, making it look like it's coming through clouds or trees. Hover over the Use Image slider and use the up and down directional buttons to cycle through the images. Find one that suits the scene. This one looks good. The Image Blur slider can soften the image for a more subtle effect. When you've finished tweaking the light, close the tweak menu using L1 and circle. Now you've set up one light, you can clone it and use it in other parts of the scene. Think about where light would naturally be coming from in the scene. The moon or the fires, for example. When you've finished lighting your scene, head back to edit mode for the next step, where I'll show you how to add fog. Now we're going to literally add some atmosphere to the scene using a fog gadget. Close any tweak menus you may have open and press circle to deselect everything in the scene. Open the assembly menu. Press square if it's closed. Select Gadgets, then Cameras and Lighting. The fog gadget icon looks like a cloud. Select it with X. We'll use this gadget to create some low-lying mist in the garden. Stamp a fog gadget somewhere in the garden with R2 or X. How about around one of the gravestones? Once you've done that, press circle to drop the gadget from your imp. To edit the fog, we'll use its gizmos. Select the gadget with X to reveal them. The zone shows you the area that will be foggy. You can grab the zone with R2 to extend it. Look closely and you'll notice that the fog gadget actually has two zones. The outer zone is the fog's fall-off zone. To adjust the fall-off, you'll need to hold L1 before grabbing the edges of the zone. Have a go now. Hold L1, then grab the zone with R2 to edit the fall-off zone. In the fall-off zone, the fog becomes gradually less and less dense until it's completely dissipated. Extend it to make the fog fade away gradually, or pull it in to have a tight ball of fog instead. Above the gadget, you'll find a position or gizmo. Use it to move the zone independently of the gadget. In the next step, we'll tweak the fog to change its colour and density. The fog is so thick I can barely see Connie. Let's see if we can improve its look in the tweak menu. Hold L1, then press square over the gadget. The fog's tweak menu has two pages, Properties and Zone Size. On the Properties page, use the fog density slider to thin out the fog a little. There's also a colour picker if you want to change the colour of the fog. Adjusting the various noise sliders is another way of changing the fog's appearance. Increasing noise strength will vary the density of the fog, making it appear patchier. The noise scale makes the patches larger or smaller, and the noise speed slider adds movement to the fog for a billowing look. There's also a slider to add glow to the fog. Add just a tiny bit of glow to make the fog look like it's catching the light. Now let's look at what the Zone Size tab has to offer. Select it at the top of the tweak menu. You can use the sliders on this page to adjust the zone size and zone fall-off, just like you could with the zones themselves. You can also change... Doesn't that look good? In the next step, we'll add some colour grading and effects. The garden is looking very spooky now. The finishing touches will be to add some grading and effects. Grade and effects changes the look of the whole scene. It's a bit like adding a photo filter. Let's take a look. Open the assembly menu. Press square if it's closed. In cameras and lighting, look for the grade and effects gadget. The icon is an instant photo with some sparkles on it. Select it with X, then stamp one anywhere in your scene. There are no gizmos for this gadget, so open its tweak menu to explore the settings. Grade and Effects is a powerful gadget with a handful of tweak menu pages. The first page, Light and Colour, has settings for brightness, contrast and saturation. Try using the sliders to refine the nighttime look of the scene. If the grass still looks a bit too green, we can fix that by easing off the saturation. Use the brightness and contrast settings to bring out the shadows. Ooh, I'm getting chills. Everything in Gradient Effects changes the look of the scene in some way. You'll be able to figure out what most things do just by experimenting with them. Take a look through the rest of the tweak menu to see the gadget's full potential. On the colour tinting page, you can individually tint the shadows, midtones and highlights of the scene. Screen effects add filmic touches like vignette, lens flare or grain. When it comes to grading and effects, there's no right or wrong answers. It's all about creating a look that suits your scene. Most of the time, less is more, but it can be fun to test the extremes too. Remember, you can always undo using the left directional button, and you can reset any tweak slider by hovering over it with your imp and pressing triangle. Or use the Studio Lighting Guide to hide all the effects. To complete the tutorial, you'll need to stamp the spooky door in the scene. You can find it in the tutorial collection. Once you've placed the door, head into play mode. Walk Connie through the spooky door to see what Cuthbert thinks about the garden's new look.
In this tutorial, you'll use logic to make health go up and go down. Oh, Cuthbert. Let's start by going into play mode. See if you can get Connie across that first gap. Oops. Sorry, Connie. I forgot to fix that. Don't worry, though. Even after falling such a long way, Connie's just fine. There's only one problem. There's no way for her to get back up. What we need is for Connie to respawn on a platform if she falls. So that's going to be our next job. First, switch back to edit mode. Remember to rewind time with L3, as we always do after play mode. In order to make Connie respawn, we're going to use a health modifier gadget. We'll use it to make the floor around the platforms lethal. Health modifiers can damage or heal anything that has a health manager. And, as luck would have it, Connie has one built into her logic. Go to the Assembly menu. Open it with the square button if it's closed. Select the Gadgets menu, the one with the 3 connected squares. You'll find the health modifier in the Movers and Output section, which is represented by a box with an arrow. Now select the button that has a clockwork heart on it. Your imp will now be equipped with a health modifier gadget. Stamp it somewhere central, near the floor, using R2 or X. Then unequip the gadget with Circle. Your scene now has a health modifier, but to make it work as intended, we'll have to tweak it first. We'll do that in the next step. Let's go ahead and open the Health Modifiers Tweak menu. Hover over it, hold L1 and press square. Here you can set the options for how the health modifier works. That includes how much health is modified, which is shown in the first slider. Right now, it's set to -100. This means it will take 100 health points away from anything it affects. Just enough to make Connie respawn. The modifier mode is set to per hit, so 100 health points will be taken away when anything touches it. But since we want the area around the platforms to be lethal, we need to set the modifier type to zone. Select the zone icon with X now, then go to the Zone Properties tab so we can change its size and shape. The icon is at the top of the menu and looks like a box in a zone. Look for the Zone Shape section of the menu, then select the cube. You can use the zone sliders to make the zone bigger. Be careful not to make it too tall. The respawn zone should be level with the pink lines around the platforms. If you need to, move the health modifier gadget nearer to the floor. When you hover over the edges of the zone, you'll see white arrow gizmos appear. Grabbing these with R2 will let you change the size of the zone. Using those, you can make sure the area around the platforms is covered. Now let's test it in play mode and see what happens. Perfect. If Connie falls off now, she'll just respawn back on the platform. Before we move on, maybe we should do something about this booby-trapped bridge. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. There. See what's causing it? It's that trigger zone. When Connie activates it, the bridge collapses and there's no way across. If you've finished the first logic tutorial, you'll know that the counter is being used to remember the trigger zone has been activated. If you follow the wires, you'll see there's one connected to each block. These red dots on the blocks are not gadgets. They show that a wire is connected to a setting in the block's tweak menu. Explore the logic for yourself. Or, if you want to move on and get Connie on her way, just delete the trigger zone by pressing triangle over it. That'll prevent any of the logic from activating. Then, once Connie can safely make it to the second platform, move on to the next step. Now's probably a good time to show you how to add checkpoints. When playable characters like Connie activate a checkpoint, the scene remembers their progress. So when they respawn, they'll appear at the last checkpoint instead of starting off at the beginning. Go to the Assembly menu, then the Gadgets menu. If the last section you used is still open, close it by pressing circle over it. Expand the Gameplay Gear section with X, then select the checkpoint. It's the one that looks like a location marker. There. Now your imp is equipped with a checkpoint gadget. The direction of a checkpoint determines which way a character will face when it respawns. So make sure the front of the gadget, the side with the black outline, is facing the direction you want Connie to face. Remove the gadget from your imp with the circle button, then open the Checkpoints Tweak menu. Checkpoints use a detection zone, just like health modifiers. So select the Zone Size tab from the menu. This is set to a sphere by default. But to make sure it can't be missed, let's change it to a cube. You can use the zone size sliders to make the checkpoint cover the width of the platform. Above the gadget, you'll see a white Move gizmo. Grab it with R2 to put the activation zone where you want it. Just make sure Connie can't miss it. The white handle shows the direction Connie will face when she respawns. Check that it's pointing the right way. Grab it with R2 if you need to adjust it. Let's close that tweak menu with L1 and circle. Now try it out in play mode to see if the checkpoint remembers your progress. Sorry, Connie. We're gonna have to respawn you again. But it's all in the name of science, I promise. Great, there she is, right at the checkpoint again. When you're ready, go back to edit mode, rewind time, and move on to the next step. This next bridge looks a bit too hot to walk on. But Connie's a tough explorer, and she's always ready for danger, so let's give it a go. Okay, that block's too big for Connie to jump over. Better get her back to safety before it's too late. Let's switch back to edit mode and see how the bridge is damaging Connie. Move closer to the bridge and keep an eye out for any gadgets attached to it. Ah, there's one. A clockwork heart icon, so it's another health modifier. It looks like instead of using a zone, this one is attached to the bridge. So whenever Connie walks on it, she loses health. If only that block wasn't in the way, she could make it across. But what if the block itself could lose health? We could give it a health manager of its own and see how that works out. Go to the Assembly menu, then open the Gadgets menu. You may need to close the Gameplay Gear section if you opened it earlier. Then you can expand the Movers and Output section. Look for a heart icon, not the clockwork heart this time. Select it with X to give your imp a health manager gadget. Stamp one near the block with R2 or X, then press circle to unequip it from your imp. To make the health manager affect the block, we'll need to attach it. The easiest way to attach gadgets to objects is to use what we call Surface Snap. Grab the health manager with R2 and hold it over the block. All you have to do to activate Surface Snap is hold L1 while your imp holds the gadget. This makes it hug the surface of any object you hover over. Now release R2 to attach the gadget to the block. You can also let go of L1 to stop using Surface Snap. In the next step, I'll show you how to tweak this health manager. Now that we've given the block health, let's take a closer look at it. Hover over the health manager, hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. The sliders here define the block's maximum and current health. Click R3 to play time, and you'll see the health starts to go down. That's because the bridge's health modifier is damaging it. But you'll notice it's going down much slower than Connie's health was when she was on the bridge. The reason for that is this health manager has a 1-second cooldown. So whenever the block takes damage, it's invulnerable for 1 second after that. Grab the cooldown slider with X and pull it to the left with your imp. So what happens when it reaches 0? Not a lot right now. But we can deal with that in the next step. For now, feel free to experiment with the health manager settings. Start time with R3 to see your changes, then rewind it with L3 to reset the health manager. Once you're done, you can manager settings, not a lot right now, the X, and pull it to the left with your imp. So what happens when it reaches 0? Not a lot right now. But we can deal with that in the next step. For now, feel free to experiment with the health manager settings. Start time with R3 to see your changes, then rewind it with L3 to reset the health manager. Once you're done, you can move on to the next step. An object doesn't automatically get destroyed when it runs out of health, so we need to do a bit more work before we can get rid of that block. Let's take a closer look at its health manager. If its tweak menu is still open, close that first with L1 and circle. See the output ports on its right edge. Hover over the one at the bottom, the one that has a heart with a cross over it. This is the no health output, which sends a signal when the health manager is depleted. It can be used to trigger any number of things, but right now, we're going to use it to destroy the block. Go to the Assembly menu and take a look in the Gadgets section. It may still be open from earlier, when you selected the Health Manager. Look for a skull icon on a button in the Movers and Output section and select it with X. This is the Destroyer gadget. It destroys whatever it's attached to. To attach it to the block, we can use Surface Snap. So hover the Destroyer over the block, hold L1 to make it Surface Snap, and press R2 or X to stamp it. Now you can unequip the Destroyer gadget with Circle. Okay, before we connect it up, let's just see if it works by clicking R3. And select it with X. This is the Destroyer gadget. It destroys whatever it's attached to. To attach it to the block, we can use Surface Snap. So hover the Destroyer over the block, hold L1 to make it Surface Snap, and press R2 or X to stamp it. Now you can unequip the Destroyer gadget with Circle. Okay, before we connect it up, let's just see if it works by clicking R3. Oh, it works all right. When time is running, the Destroyer activates and destroys the block. Rewind time with L3 to bring it back. We don't want the Destroyer to activate until the block's health has run out. To do that, we'll need to connect the No Health output port to the Destroyer's power. So hover your imp over the Health Manager's No Health output port and press R2 or X to create a wire. This will make power ports appear on the gadgets in the scene. Stretch the wire over to the Destroyer and connect it to the power port with R2 or X. Great! Time to test it again with R3 and see what happens. When the block's health runs out, it will get destroyed, leaving the path clear for Connie. But how do we know how much health the block has left? We could always look at its tweak menu, but you can't see that in play mode. So click L3 to rewind time, and I'll show you how to display health in the next step. If the Health Manager's tweak menu isn't open already, open it now with L1 and square. When you hover over the menu sliders and buttons, you'll see ports popping out of the side. These work just like the ones on the outside of the gadget, but there are a lot more of them. And you might also have noticed that there's another gadget stamped on the side of the block. That's a number displayer. If we connect a wire from the current health output to the number displayer's input port, we'll be able to see the block's health count down in play mode. So let's go ahead and do that. Hover over the current health slider's output port. Then press R2 or X to create a wire and stretch it to the number displayer. Once you've connected it to its input with R2 or X, you can switch over to play mode and test out the whole scene so far. Excellent. Now we can see the block taking damage until it's destroyed. Once you can get Connie to the next platform, switch back to edit mode and move on to the next step. Well, Connie made it through, but she's a bit worse for wear. The burn effect you see on her is triggered by the current health output from her health manager. It gives you a visual cue of her health. The more singed she gets, the less health she has. I'm not sure poor Connie has enough health left to make it across the last bridge. What she needs is a bit of healing, so let's create a healing zone where she can recharge. This green pad looks like a good place to recover. We can turn it into a healing zone by placing a health modifier on it, using Surface Snap. You've used Surface Snap before, so this should be no problem. Go to the Assembly menu and select a health modifier from the Movers and Output menu. It's the one with the clockwork heart on it, remember? Now activate Surface Snap by holding L1. Then attach the health modifier to the green pad. Now you can unequip the gadget with the circle button and open the modifier's tweak menu. We need to change it so it heals Connie. The health modifier is set to -100 by default, which won't do Connie any good. She has 100 health to start with, so that will take it all away and make her respawn. Grab the slider with X, drag it right, and set it to +20. We want the healing zone to heal Connie while she's standing on it, so you also need to set the modifier mode to continuous. You can leave the modifier type as impact, since you've snapped the health modifier to the platform. And that's all there is to it. Close the tweak menu with L1 and circle, and give it a try in play mode. All right. That should give Connie the health boost she needs to cross that final bridge. Oh, she's been through a lot today, so take her through the door to end this tutorial.